Right,
Text in the post.
folks, we are live, so
Here we go.
behave yourself.
Okay.
Oh,
Right, here we go. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Property Professional Show. I'm in Devon this week, which is a nice break, and it's really, really good to get back into the real world again and see people out in the shops. The whole high street is back alive again, so maybe the high street isn't quite dead as people want it to be and convert it all to residential premises. We shall see. We shall see how that goes. But we're very lucky today because Linda is joining us. Linda Wright is joining us back again today. Hi, Linda. And she will give us an update on probably one of the most busiest changes of planning news during lockdown that we've, at least the government's been busy changing the rules and working from home and doing something useful. Because Linda's got an update for us, and the proof's always in the pudding because we all hear little snippets and all think it's all fabulous news and we can all go off and do what we want. And then we have to go and talk to Linda, and it's not quite what it says when you actually drill down into the paperwork, but it's still a lot better than it was. So let's hope there that there's some news there. My co-host, Dill. Say hi, Dill.
Hi, Dill. Missed you last week, Simon.
I know. So he'll be running the show later on with Linda. Unfortunately today, Bobby's had a little accident at the house. Well, he didn't, but unfortunately, I think it's a shame and these things happen. But he had an unfortunate car accident. Someone's crashed into the front of his house or the front of his garden, and it's done a lot of damage. So unfortunately, he can't join us today to give us an update on the finance. So if I may, I am going to read you a little statement today on what's actually happening out there. So a couple of bits of news on the finance side. Halifax is the latest to update criteria for non-UK nationals. They want everyone to have a permanent right to reside now in the UK for their cases that do not meet the following criteria. Joint application has to lived in the UK more than 5 years. Loan to value is less than or equal to 75%. Income is greater or equal to 100,000. The good news on the rate cuts, it just keeps coming, and we had a feeling this was going to happen. Nationwide has cut selective rates up to 0.35% out on fixed and variable rate products. There's some really cracking deals out there. I'm just looking at one here, a 2-year 60% LTV fixed rate product is now 1.09%. I know it's got a £1,500 fee on that, but if you had a £500,000 loan, that is crazy. That's £5,000 a year round numbers in interest. That's just crazy. That means you could have a £500,000 mortgage if you have the income to go with it, and it'll cost you £400 a month in interest. It's outrageous, but that's where we are. Shawbrook is cutting commercial rates by up to 30 basis points. Rates are much higher as you would expect with Shawbrook products. They're not quite as selective on their client bases or follow the same rules on commercial deals as residential, but the rates are still starting with a 6. There's plenty of room in there for the property developers to make some money. We were expecting to see a sales surge after the stamp duty extension, and they'll probably be begging again to have another extension, but I don't see the government doing that in the summer, so need to get all those deals wrapped up. Still seeing lots of high demand for property, well exceeds supply, so that only looks good really, because that's just going to keep pushing the prices up. I mean, we're not going to feel the effects of the pandemic really until furlough stops. So I would tread caution with that, the words that these people use when they say, "Oh, housing's going up by another 5% this year." When furlough stops and the real world kicks in, it'd be really interesting to see what's going to be happening out there. And absolutely no one can guess what's going to what's going to happen there. I keep hearing people saying, "Oh, it's going to crash." Others saying it's going to go up. Last year they were saying the same thing. I'd never want to be a property prediction expert. Your view's going to change every day over what's happening. So there's a bit of news on finance. Hopefully Bobby will be back with us next week and he can give you his more fluent, more valuable update than mine. That's something for you guys anyway. So today's show will be going to go over and talk to Ranjit from Property Investor News, because no show would be the same without having Ranjit here to update us. We firmly and recommend Property Investor News as a magazine that everyone should subscribe to. So let's hear a little bit from Ranjit now. Over to you, Ranjit.
Thank you very much, Simon. And Dil, you know what I'm going to ask?
So Zoom has side effects. It gives you psychic powers. I know what you're going to ask, and I think I've already answered it. So go for it.
Okay.
There you go.
He's away.
So for all of you, as Ranjit was going to ask, can I share my screen? And
right.
Psychic abilities given to you by the extra version of Zoom. I've already given it to him.
Right. I take it you can see my slide, yeah?
Yes.
Certainly can.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dil and Simon. My name is Ranjit from Property Investor News. I'd like to start with this. There is no secrets to success, and success is no accident. It's hard work, persevering, learning, studying, attending events like this, and also sacrifices and more. Remember, no pain, no gain, or no pressure, no diamonds. We have been publishing this for over 18 years. Who is it for? Investors, developers, traders, landlord, land buyers, solicitors, accountants, surveyors, party wall surveyors, and the list goes on and on. Why you should subscribe to Property Investor News: 1, education and specialist knowledge; 2, information to weigh up the deals; 3, strategies so you can decide whether it's right for you; 4, confidence to go forward in your business. Just some key articles in our current 2021 issue relevant to your property businesses and the changing and the challenging world. Opening comments from our editor, Richard Bowser. UK property market news, landlord news, good, bad, and the ugly. This month we had an ugly story. Landlord facing jail if he fails to repay illegally obtained rent. Ordered by the Crown Court judge to pay back £739,263.58. Development and planning news across the UK cities and the towns. Great tool for researching to areas to invest in. Investor interview, listed building conversion, commercial property, the rise of alternative real estate investment by Susie Carter, Charter Surveyor. Investor opinion, present a cautionary tale of today's property developers by Helen Shawley, and investor and a former investment banker. Planning Matters, Planning by Degrees by David Camp, planning consultant and barrister. Economic and Property, The Next Decade by Adam Lawrence. Finance Matters, Richard Bowser, editor, Property Investor News, talk to Carl Griggs of CPC Finance. Investor Opinion, COVID, Stamp Duty, Investing by John Corrie, international investor. European and worldwide news and much, much more. Subscribe to Property Investor News and read these articles in greater depth and much, much more. Question to ask yourself that changes everything. What is going well in my business? Question for you. Do you have the expertise, the knowledge, the insight to adapt and prosper? Let us help you on your property journey to investing success. Subscribe to the ongoing education and an in-depth market analysis every month. Access to online resources, to 15,000 keyword search articles, 250 plus videos and webinar archive, and a hard copy of Property Investor News magazine delivered to your office or home every month for just $7.95 a month. Because property investment and development is for the brave and the bold in these changing, challenging times, therefore we put together a bold offer. Learn from the past, plan for the future. It is an event offer only, not available online, so please follow the instructions on the slide. The offer is you'll receive 6 issues of Property Investor News magazine, including our 200th issue, plus the book Before the Hammer Falls, written by 2 auction experts in the UK. So all you do is go onto our website, subscribe, then email me with your name, postal address, and the long reference number, which the system will generate, and we will get your offer package on its way to you. Remember, the power to change life lies in simplest of choices. Every day you have a choice, stay the same or change for better. Why stay the same? Subscribe to Property Investor News. Stay on track with up-to-date information, specialist knowledge, education, and much, much more. The whole world is going through challenging times. Change is inevitable. Just remember, it's not the strongest nor the most intelligent survive. It is the most adaptable to change. So never, never stop learning, because life never, never stops teaching. And I'll leave you with this. Please remember, it's your life, to your dreams, through your goals, for your business. Therefore, please do not let anyone hold you back. Subscribe to Property Investor News today. And I will not hold you back any longer. Simon and Dill, back to you.
Thank you, Ranjit. Very good. I won't ask which one's Simon and which one's Dill, but anyway, that's a different scenario. So, if you
the screens, we need the screens back.
Ranjit, can we have our screens back, please? We'll be nice.
I have given you the screen back.
Fantastic. Right. So, thank you for that. And as Simon said, no property meeting is complete without Maharaja.
Thank you very much.
On that package, Property Investor News, my personal copy here. This is the January version. If you don't subscribe, you still get it. There's some guy talking about Section 1 of the Party Wall Act there. Please read it carefully if you want anything to do with property. It's really helpful. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you, Ranjit. Now, it's that time of the meeting. Put away your coloring pencils. Get out your note-taking stuff. Listen very carefully to our next guest. I'm just going to introduce Linda as one of 2 things. I believe she's the headmistress, but she'd like to refer to herself as the pit bull. But we'll let her decide. And Linda, I won't be able to do justice to an intro to you, but you really know your stuff. Thank you for taking your time out and sharing it at a really busy period. And I'm sure you'll explain why it's a busy period for you. So, Linda, enough of my stuff. Over to you.
Right. I'll ask the inevitable. I can share my screen, can I?
By the power of Zoom, I'll give you screen share.
Excellent. Oh, no.
He states.
There we go. Can we all see that, people?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. We'll just put it onto full screen so that we know what we're talking about. Right. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Not really. I've talked about this previously, and I'm calling my talk today Planning Property, Pandemic, Pajamas and Pricks. Now, steady boys and girls out there. This is an update to everything that's been going on, specifically with youth classes changes. And this is the very, very, very up to date, April 2021. So it's relevant for this month. This is the reason that I'm calling this Planning Property Pandemic Pajamas and Pricks. Most of us have been working at home in our pajamas, and I would imagine I don't want to insult anybody here, but I would imagine a huge number of us now have had at least one vaccination. I've had my first vaccination. My next one isn't due until next month, but I've had the first one. We've got Boris, and God love him, Robbie Jenrick, who's been called Rob the Builder. And we've had a pandemic for the last 12 months, and we've had a lot of difficult times, but people still seem to be doing the property journey, and lots of people are contacting me to help them with their planning. Sometimes I can help, other times I can't. But let's have a look at what's been going on over the last 12 months. Right, I wanted to run through this because there's lots of stuff has came out last year, but then there was a consultation paper on Class E that came out in December and the consultation ended in January. There was a lot of speculation as to what was going to happen with that consultation paper. It has now been brought out. The statutory instrument has now been put into legislation. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. But first of all, I just want to go over what is out there at the moment. The new reforms came out. They came out middle of last year. New Part 20, Class A. This is the big sexy issue of being able to put upward extensions on purpose-built blocks of flats. So 2 additional stories of flats on purpose-built blocks of flats is very specific. And if you've already used an office to residential conversion prior approval permission, you cannot use this particular new permitted development. They keep calling them permitted development rights. They're not. Everybody says, oh, well, it's permitted, I can just go ahead and do it. You can't. There has to be submitted a prior approval. You have to go to the council and get their prior approval for all of these things. Right. There's also Part 1, Class AA. Now, this really irritates me because there's AA twice. Idiots have not thought about it in Whitehall, but anyhow, it's a bit confusing. Part 1, Class AA, is the enlargement of dwelling houses by additional stories. Now, it's not additional flats, and I'm happy for you to take screenshots of these slides, but please do not be referring to them in 6 months' time, because this summer, I expect there's going to be a whole raft of new planning legislation coming out, and new permitted development rights to take over from the existing rights, because the main office to residential is going to end on the 31st of July. So I'm sorry, I keep going off at a tangent. Right, Part 1, Class AA, enlargement of dwelling houses. So you can take a dwelling house. For example, a detached house doesn't have to be detached. You can do these things, but you're not going to be able to put 2 stories on. You're probably only going to be able to add 1 story if it's a terraced or if it's a semi-detached. Enlargement of dwellings to create additional space. So this is not to create flats on top of your house. It is purely, for example, if you have the normal ground floor, you have, I don't know, a 3-bedroom detached house. And what you want to do is you want to put another 1 or 2 stories on top of here, in which you would provide, everybody's working from home, you could provide a home office in the roof space or in a further story, and then you could provide a master bedroom, ensuite, dressing room, that kind of thing. And then the kids could have the 2nd floor to themselves. That's the kind of thing that this is intended for. It's not to create additional flats, whereas the upward extensions is specifically to create additional residential flats, self-contained units. Part 20, now the classes AA, AB, AC, and AD. It's quite complicated, this, so you really do need to get some advice from, if not a planning consultant, then certainly architects. Some architects will be able to get to grips with this. Just be careful and make sure you get the right advice. I had somebody on the phone the other day asking why the council were refusing to deal with his planning application and were asking him to withdraw. It was an office building on a business park, fairly modern, quite nice. There was a small plant room underneath, and the building was raised up out of the ground, 2 stories, but there was a retaining wall and there was a ramped landscaped area in front. He and his architect were claiming that this was 3 stories. The planning department said, no, it's 2 stories. And I have to say, looking at it, I had to agree with the planning department. So and he paid £6,000 or £7,000 in application fees. So you've got to be careful with these things. So part 20, classes AA, AB, AC, and AD allow you the opportunity to add additional stories. Now, if it's a terraced or a semi, you're only going to be able to add 1 story. So don't get carried away with that. To dwellings and mixed use commercial properties. So you could have a retail and flats above, and you could put additional stories on to create new flats. Not got time to go through all of this, it would take all day. So that's another element to this. You can add stories to mixed use commercial properties. Now, part 20, class ZA, I'm so pleased that they gave it another alphabetic section in Z, because it makes it a lot easier to remember. Demolition and rebuild. Now, this is something that has been talked about for the past 5 or 6 years, and everybody thought, oh, yeah, it'll never come in. They brought it in. So a detached purpose-built, and I'm saying this very specifically, that if it's attached in any way to another building, it will not work. Detached purpose-built blocks of flats or offices. So this is going to be partially replacing class O. So you can not just convert these office or blocks of flat, well, you wouldn't convert blocks of flats to flats, but you can actually demolish them completely. Now, there are a whole raft of conditions, as you would expect on all of these, so you have to be careful. So you can demolish these and rebuild. One of the criteria is that you can only build within the footprint of that existing building. You can't make it bigger from a footprint point of view, but you can add additional stories onto that rebuild. So this is quite an important new prior approval system that you can actually demolish and rebuild, because some of these buildings that have been converted are just not fit for purpose. So, right. Changes to the new use classes order. The use classes order has been kicking around, amended and nibbled at and tweaked and since 1987. So when they said that this was a radical change, the central government were right. So it brings in new classes, and I'm going to go through this because it's important that you understand how this has changed. New classes E, F1 and F2, and certain uses have been added into the sui generis class. That means they're of their own kind, and everything you do with certain classes needs now planning permission. What I'm going to talk about today is on the back of that consultation document, Class E. Class E to residential, and I'll explain what that. The statutory instrument was published on the 31st of March, and it comes into force next week, 21st of April. But you can't submit an application under this Class E to residential until the 1st of August, and I'll explain why that is. Also, there's a transitional period for prior approval because of the change of use order being altered. So we've got this old system, the general permitted development order, change of use, office residential, that type of thing. And we've got the new use classes order because it's changed lots of uses into Class E. So there's a transitional period, because otherwise there would have been this policy vacuum. There's a transitional period where both procedures will run concurrently. So I'm calling these the old style prior approval applications will come to an end on the 31st of July this year. So you're not going to be able to do those. So you need to be careful if you want to do a classic office to residential, that kind of thing. Class M to residential. You need to get your applications in before the 31st of July. So let's talk about, it's important that we know what the changes to the use classes order are before we can talk about this Class E to residential. So what happened was all of these use classes, Class A, shops, Class A2, financial and professional services, Class A3, cafes and restaurants, Class B1, A, B, and C. Now that was the category for office to residential, office, business, there's some research and developments of stuff in there. Part of, it's only partial, Class D1, and you'd have to very carefully check. That's clinics and medical health facilities and creches. Class D2, in part, gyms and indoor sports and fitness. Now, what's happened is they've taken all of these former uses and they've put them all into one use class, which is Class E. It's the commercial, business and service class, Class E. This is intended to help with flexibility on the high street. And it's not permitted development. Don't think it's permitted. It's actually so that all of the use classes within this Class E now, formally A1, A2, A3, B1, D1, D2, can all move between uses. There is no permission required because putting them into one use class means there's no development at all. So it doesn't require anything. So if you have a property that is currently a shop, an A1, it now falls into the Class E use. So if it's a shop, if you have a tenant who comes along and says, do you know what, I'd really like to change this to a cafe restaurant. Right, fine, get the tenant in, go in, change it to a cafe restaurant, no problem. Don't need to go anywhere near the planning department. If that cafe restaurant then leaves after 6 months and you get somebody who comes along and says, do you know what, I'd quite like to use this as a children's day nursery. Now, whether the buildings would fit for these purposes, I'm not going to get into that. Right, fine, sign the lease, go in, use it as a children's day nursery. Right, that goes, and whoever's come along and done that doesn't want to do it anymore. Another tenant comes along, wants to use it as a shop. Carry on, use it as a shop. Then someone else comes along and says, well, actually, I'd quite like to use this as a yoga studio. Use it. So can you see what I mean? You just do not need to go anywhere near it makes it very, very flexible because let's face it, and it's not limited to high streets because let's face it, high streets are going to be struggling at the moment. So that's Class E. It also introduced Class F1, nothing to do with Lewis Hamilton. I've made this joke before. Learning and non-residential institutions, and Class F2, local community. There's also sui generis. Now, this is important. Class A4, pubs, wine bars, drinking establishments, and Class A5, hot food takeaways, are now added into the sui generis category, which means that anything that is done with pubs or hot food takeaways is going to require full planning permission. Now, at the moment, under Class M, you can convert hot food takeaways to residential. So that is still there up until 31st of July. So I had someone come along and say, well, my hot food takeaway's got seating in it. Is it a restaurant? Well, no, probably not. Right. This is something I nicked from somebody else's presentation. I thought it was quite nice. It was very pretty and very calming in pale pinks and blues. So that, if you wanted to take a screenshot of that, that just shows you what the old uses were. It's basically what I've got on my previous slide. And then Lichfields. Lichfields are the go-to. Actually, I've still got September 2020 on there. Ignore that. They will, oh yes, this is their September 2020. They've actually done a new guide. I trust Lichfield's guides. They're spot on. So if you want to look at Class E and what you can and can't do with it, go on to Google or whatever your browser is, Litchfield's Guide to Use Classes. You must put in April 2021. This one that I've put on there is from when the changes first came in last year. But it will tell you very specifically what the current changes are. I trust Litchfield's guys, they're very, very good. So transitional period, this is what I talked to you about earlier. Because of the use classes order and the general permitted, there's a mismatch. There's a chasm between the two now. So this transitional period has been introduced for the old and the new to sit together until they're all pulling in one direction. So the old style, as I've said, I keep using office to residential, but there are other prior approvals. But office to residential, the prior approval procedure under that will come to an end on the 31st of July. So if you have any of these things that you want to do, you need to get this in before the 31st of July. And the government stated intention is that this summer, they are going to introduce new revised permitted development rights that, well, prior approval rights that are gonna take over where the old style GPDO initially started. So, general permitted development order, as I've said, the current permitted changes will end on the 31st of July. I keep banging on about this because I don't want people to miss this date. So we're currently talking about Class M, retail shops, hot food takeaways, financial and professional services, and betting office payday loan shops. They can be converted still up until the 31st of July to residential. There are all sorts of criteria that you have to comply with. Class N is amusement arcades or centres and casinos. Nobody's approached me to do one, to change a casino to residential. Don't know why, but there you go. Class O, as we all know, office to residential, we're quite familiar with this now. Class PA, light industrial. Now, you need to be very careful with this. If you're looking at these kinds of properties, this had to have, it's now expired, Class PA. You had to have had approval before the 1st of October last year. If you're buying one of these buildings and the previous owner says, oh, I've got prior approval for light industrial to residential, that's fine. It has to have been obtained before the 1st of October last year. It will last for 3 years, but if you buy this property thinking that you will do it at some point, you'll renew the permission and you'll do it at some point in the future, you can't. This use has now expired. Now, it may be replaced with something else this next year. But at the moment, the Class PA has gone. You cannot redo this under this prior approval system for light industrial. And then we've got Class Q, agricultural buildings. Possibly they're going to include that in new revised permitted development changes. I don't know at the moment because it's all sort of a bit up in the air. There's also Class G, where you have permitted development for 2 flats above A1 and A2, A1 shops and A2 offices. That is fully permitted development. So I don't think that is going to end on the 31st of July. It may be replaced with something else because the intention is to introduce new revised permitted development rights. So that's where we're up to at the moment. Now, why is the current prior approval rate? What are the benefits? Why is it so interesting to people, especially property developers? And it is going to end on the 31st of July. The council application fee, you can be putting 50 flats in a building, in an office building, and the fee is £96. Now, as I've said before, I'm not getting out of bed for 96 quid. So I don't understand why. I feel sorry for local planning authorities who have to deal with this. It's a simpler application process-ish. The problem is they've now added to this application process and it's not half as simple as it was. It's changed quite radically with the additional requirements from last year and the additional requirements that came in on the 6th of April this year. So 56 days to issue a decision, or you get deemed consent. The prior approval will last for 3 years. That's the same as this one now. The council can only consider unlimited issues: highways, contamination, flood risk, noise, daylight, and I'm going to discuss that in a bit, and dwelling, now as of the 6th of April, dwelling size. No section 106 contribution. So if you're doing 50 flats, you wouldn't have to pay affordable housing contribution or any other contributions. But prior approval development is chargeable for community infrastructure levy. And certainly in the Greater London authorities, you've got the London mayoral SIL, which is to pay for the Crossrail project. So on the 1st of August last year, I'm quite horrified by this actually, because the government had to introduce a provision that said adequate levels of natural light to all habitable rooms had to be provided. This was on the back of an appeal where an inspector allowed a development to continue that had habitable rooms with no windows. Now, I'm sorry, but that's cave dwelling. If you want to live in a cave and if you want to, as a developer, want to create a cave, I think that's unforgivable, to be perfectly honest. So again, the same use classes, as I've said before, M, N, O, P, A, Q. Well, PA is gone now, so you won't be submitting a new application, and Q. The local planning authorities are now given the power that you have to submit floor plans, and some councils accepted these applications without floor plans with dimensions and the proposed use of each room, and the permission and dimensions of all windows and doors, and the elevations. Now, I've argued with councillors that if we're not changing the elevations, then you don't need drawings. But there are some councillors who said we're not going to deal with it without elevations. This new provision that came in on the 1st of August last year, and it came in and applied retrospectively to applications that were already in, it allows the local planning authority the power to refuse any prior approval applications where adequate levels of natural light are not provided. So you have to be quite careful with this. You can't mess about with it. This is one of the new requirements that has come in as from last year. Now, another one of the new requirements is size. Previously, all flats in office to residential conversions, it didn't matter what size they were. You could do a 30 square meter, and lots of people did 30 square meters just to get over the mortgage criteria, 30 square meter studio flat. Actually, in London, that might be quite generous, but there we go. But they were doing quite small studio units and just getting as many of these units in these buildings as they could. As of the 6th of April, all prior approval, all of these applications under what's called permitted development, it's not really permitted, but prior approval applications, even the old style and the new ones, have to comply with what's called the nationally described space standards. They were brought in 2015 and they were slightly amended in 2016. So the nationally described space standards, there's a table in there. Have I got this on here? Ah, yeah, there we go. I'll show you that in a minute. There's a table, it's based on the London plan. I think it's table 3.2 in the London plan. And it started off in London. Lots of councils have adopted it. Lots of councils have bigger space standards, so you need to be careful. Manchester certainly have adopted the London plan standard, and that's what this is based on. It's 39 square meters as a minimum for a single person in a 1-bed flat with a bathroom. If you've only got a shower room, it can go down to 37 square meters. But you need to be aware of this. You and your architect or whoever's doing your drawings need to be aware of this. This is the table that is taken from the nationally described space standards. So as you can see, If it's a two-person, a one-bed two-person, it's 50 square meters. So, and it goes up massively incrementally. So you do have to be careful with this. All prior approval applications will have to comply with the nationally described space standards. So changes ahead. There's the planning white paper that came out last year, was meant to be implemented in autumn last year. Not a chance. It was absolutely shredded by lots and lots of planning and construction people. So government have put the brakes on, and they have said that they're going to bring it out again for consultation again this year sometime, don't know when. But this white paper proposes the merging of Section 106 contributions and community infrastructure levy. If it does that, and that gets goes through and gets enacted, then if there is a combined Section 106 and SIL contribution requirement, the likelihood is that all of these prior approval applications will be liable for contributions. That is a game changer. If that is the whole reason for this is that there's no contributions. It was a down and dirty, quite simple, quick, easy, cheap conversion to do. That's going to be no longer be the case if this is what comes in. There's proposed to be a revised national policy framework that may have implications. There's also a proposed national good design guide, which is potentially going to have implications. There are further revisions and new permitted development rights going to be coming out. And the Class E to residential new legislation on the back of the consultation document came out. Now, this is what it was called. It's Class E to residential. It creates a new Class MA. The ethos behind this is supporting housing delivery through a new national permitted development right. It's not a permitted development right. You cannot just go ahead and do it. It requires the prior approval of the council. Introduced on the 31st of March and comes, I should say the 21st of April, there's a typo there, comes into force on the 21st, which is next week. Now, I've put this amused me. I've put this photograph on here. It's in Salford somewhere, and someone has gone ahead and converted a shop to residential. And they've bricked up the front, and they've put a front door in, and they've put a residential window in. They've not really matched the, you know, you've got what looks like a sex shop on one side, Adam and Eve's, and you've got a trophies shop on the other side. This one has been converted to residential. They've not even matched the brickwork, and they've not even bothered taking the fascia along the front off either. So it's it's a half-hearted attempt at converting a shop to residential. And my concern is that that is what is going to happen up and down the country. So in order to, I can go through, I can answer questions, but there's lots and lots of little nuances and criteria and conditions and restrictions that you have to comply with. I have tried to put this into a one-page sheet, and I've put this on social media all over the place so that people know about it. So Class E to residential is the new use Class MA. It's for shops, professional offices, restaurants, cafes, clinics, creches, gyms, indoor sports. The new Class MA under the General Permitted Development Order comes into force on the 21st of April 2021. But you can't submit an application under this process until the 1st of August 2021. So that's the first thing to know about. Buildings in Class E use from the 1st of September 2020, sorry. So they have to have been in a Class E type of use. I've gone through the Class E uses from 1st of September 2020. In the old original use class, it's A, A1, A2, A3, all of the ones that I identified earlier, it must have been used for 2 years prior to the submission of the planning application. So if you're going to submit an application on the 1st of August, it has to have been in use for this type of Class E use for 2 years prior to that. Also, it must have been vacant for 3 months prior to you submitting that application. Now, the reason for this is because what they're looking at doing, central government are looking at doing, is looking at any shops that have been left because obviously companies have gone bust, they've moved on, they've consolidated, they've gone into different areas. So must be vacant for 3 months before you submit the application. Initially in the consultation document, there was no identified size of building, but now they've identified the size of building up to a maximum of 1,500 square meters. So that's 1,500 square meters. That's actually quite a big lump of building. So, but there's a size limit on it. There wasn't before, and people were saying, oh, we can convert Debenhams to residential. And you think, oh God, no, that's not going to work. So it's 1,500 square meters. It applies in conservation areas, but not listed buildings, obviously, and all of the usual protected areas that we know about with office to residential conversions. A prior approval application to the council is required under what's called Class W of the General Permitted Development Order. It's the same, very similar as the office to it's the same as the office to residential. The matters that will need to be considered by the local planning authority, and this has changed slightly from the consultation document. Excuse me. Transport and highways impact, land contamination, flood risk, adequate levels of natural light, noise coming from outside of the building that might have an impact on the tenants, impact on occupiers in heavy industrial areas. So if you are on the edge of an industrial site and you're wanting to convert a building, they will take into account, and they may even ask for a noise report. If you've got, I don't know, a scrap metal merchants or a breaker's yard or something next door or behind, then they will take any noise coming from that site into account. They will also take into account any detrimental impact on health centres and nursery provision. If you're going to be converting a health centre, now the likelihood is there will have been, oh, I don't know, Taylor Wimpey will have built, Bovis will have built 1,000 homes down the road, and part of their contributions will have been to provide a new site and build a new health centre because the old one is not fit for purpose anymore. So the doctors and the primary care trust will move into that new health centre and the old one will be left redundant. Now, if that is the case, then obviously there's going to be no impact because on the provision of the health centre, because they'll have moved to a new site. So that will not be an issue, but that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, if you are going to be converting, now this is again is something new that's been introduced. If you're going to be converting a building in a conservation area, obviously you might be taking out a shop front at the ground floor. And if you are doing that, then there is a consideration to be had as to what impact that will have on the conservation area. If you're going to be bricking it up and putting a door and a domestic window in there, what kind of impact is that going to have on the character of the conservation area? There's no mention of operations being included in this. So, for example, if you needed to do some external work, such as, I don't know, a fire escape or something like that, that will have to be the subject of a separate full planning application once you've had your main prior approval application determined. There is initially on the consultation document, they were saying that they were going to give the local planning authority 70 days to determine, but they've changed that. It's now going to be the same as all of the other prior approvals, 56 days for the local planning authority to determine. This is important because if they don't determine it on day 57, you have consent by default, or what's called deemed consent. So that's important that they've kept that in there, because for the other stuff that I was talking about earlier, they've not. They've given the council as long as they like to deal with these things. This is important in this type of use, that they only get the 56 days. So it's 8 weeks, but it puts a marker in the sand that they cannot go beyond that. Although, however, there is a simple line in Class W that says, if the council come back and they agree with you to extend the time period, they can now extend that time period. So maybe the 56 days is just going out of the window. Fees. At the time that I put this on social media a couple of weeks ago, we didn't know what the fees were. They hadn't come out. The fees have now emerged. And this is a massive, massive change. Whereas previously, your one application was going to cost £96. This is now going to cost you £100 per dwelling, so per flat, up to a maximum of £5,000. That's the fee that you pay to the council for the council to deal with the application. If it is refused or withdrawn, you do not get that fee refunded. So that comes off your bottom line and needs to be part of these lovely Excel spreadsheets that everybody sets up. So I hope that has given you a whistle-stop tour. Now, I've had a few questions on various webinars that I've done. Can I demolish and rebuild a building that I've converted from offices? No, you can't. If you've used a previous prior approval system procedure, you cannot now go and use the new demolish and rebuild, the Class ZA, so you can't. What about Article 4 directions? Lots of councils brought in Article 4 directions to remove the permitted development right for office to residential. They have been extended. They are going to continue to apply until the 31st of July 2022. Does this apply in Wales? No. Nothing to do with Wales. This is England only. Now, this was a good one. Is a gastropub a pub or a restaurant? I.e., will it be in Class E and can I convert it to residential, or will it not? This is going to be up to the local planning authority, but I find that most gastropubs tend to be a pub first and a restaurant second. It's likely to be classed as a pub. So Class A4 into sui generis use, you cannot convert it to residential under this new system. My takeaway, I think I mentioned this earlier, my takeaway has got seating in it. Is it Class E? No, it's probably going to be classed as a takeaway. If you've got a couple of tables and chairs outside or in the corner, it's a Class A5 hot food takeaway. And it's now sui generis. So for these new classes, it's going to need full planning permission. But you can still use Class M up until the 31st of July to convert to residential. So that is me and my whistle-stop tour. If you've got any questions about these things, or if you just want to have a very expensive chat, that's fine. Telephone consultation of 30 minutes. For initial planning advice, people come to me and they've got architects involved and they've submitted the application and they send me 30 documents and drawings. This is not what this is for. This is a 30-minute initial planning advice. Email my lovely admin team at admin@planetright.co.uk or call the landline. If you call the mobile, it's probably either going to be switched off, diverted, or I'll be on a call already. It's £197 plus VAT. I don't think that's excessive for the advice that I give. Some people do. If you're going to look for my website, please don't. It's under construction. It's been under construction for a while. I just can't get to it. My lady who does my website is tearing her hair out, but we will get to it eventually. I'm on LinkedIn. Please don't friend me on Facebook. I keep that for family, really. And I put stupid posts on there. LinkedIn, I put all my planning posts on LinkedIn and Twitter. And on Twitter, I'm at Planet Linda. Thank you very much indeed for listening. And that is my whistle-stop tour of Class MA.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you very much. That's awesome. I'm sure there's some questions, but quick question for you. I guess from the sounds of it, there's going to be more revisions. So when do we need to book you in for another return?
Honestly, I don't know. I suspect there's going to be something come out over the summer before a consultation document before the summer break. And then there'll be something going on in September, October time. And then there's the planning white paper. So it probably pencil me in for September, I would have thought.
Deal. You have a slot already booked. I think.
Jill, there's 3 questions actually in the Q&A. Linda, can you see them?
Oh, no, that's not a question. Steve Griffith, love Linda Wright.
I know. Well, 3 questions.
Oh!
That's the fan club. Simon, that's the fan club. We haven't got one of those. That's what we need.
No, Rashmi Panchal, one story. Does that mean including the loft? It's very specific. It's like 3.5 meters. So it means full stories. If you've got space in the loft as well, if you're just going to put roof lights in, that's probably not going to need planning permission. If you're going to put dormers in, it is going to. So it doesn't really mean a loft. It means an additional story and an additional story. But there are some of these procedures that you're only going to be able to put one story on. For example, terraced and semi-detached, you're only going to be able to add one story. So the stories are full stories. They don't include the loft. What's this? Can the bathroom be en suite? You can do what you like with your bathroom.
Linda, sorry, before you answer the last question, which is could you put your contact details back on, please, so that.
Sure.
Although we love looking at you, but I think that's more useful.
You flatterer, you. Share screen. I'll do my share screen again. Oh, there we go. Sure. There we go.
Fantastic.
Linda, before you move on as well, on the same one story, say you have a detached house.
I've got to there we go. Come on, I've deleted it. Go on, say that again.
On the same one story, if you have a detached house,
yes,
that means that the roof space remains and you can put another 2 floors.
Yes, it's 2 floors and the roof.
And can that be in a conservation area or is not for conservation?
The adding the floors, I would have to look. If it's in a conservation area, I don't think you can do it in the conservation areas. I'd have to, it's a different, I've sort of looked at, I'll have to look at all of the different changes. Go on, carry on and I'll see if I can find it for you.
Linda,
right.
charge Linda the money. Don't give him just trying to get a free.
I've got a
£197 plus VAT.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Send me the bill and a check in the post.
No, you don't get
Checks in the post. I've heard that before. Oh dear God.
So a person with a detached house, and okay, what happens to the 50% rule? Where does that go now?
No. You're confusing. Right. 50% is for any permitted development right or anything that you're putting on a house. So, for example, a single story garden room, conservatory, that kind of thing. So you mustn't cover up more than 50% of your curtilage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's not permitted. But if you're going up, you're not covering your curtilage. So it's 2 entirely different issues.
So does that mean that you can have a 2-story extension at the back?
No, it's not. It's not about 2-story extensions. These issues that I've been talking about are going on top of your building.
Yeah.
If you start doing two-story extensions at the back, they will have to comply with your normal permitted development rights if you want to do it under permitted development. Or what are you saying? Can you put a two-story extension at the back and then go up to meet?
Yeah. Either that or even go halfway to meet that.
Yeah, you're gonna need if you go up, you're gonna need full planning permission for that, I would imagine. What I would do in that case is I would get permission to go up on your house, get the prior approval, get that done first, and then do the design to add your two-story extension, well, 2.5 or 3-story extension to build into it. Look, the councils have massive powers if there is any overlooking, overshadowing, dominant impact in a conservation, impact on the character of the residential area, they can refuse.
Right. Okay.
So lots of these, it's all very well saying, oh, it's prior approval. Lots of these things are going to be refused.
Okay. That makes a bit clear because this, I'm not sure that this should be using this prior approval phrase at all.
Well, prior approval, not permitted development.
Not permitted development, rather, yeah.
I don't mind prior approval because you have to get the prior approval of the council. Permitted development, I think, is completely wrong.
It's misleading and everything.
It is. It's terrible.
Sure.
Okay.
Go on again.
Linda, put your slide. So before your telephone consultation, we need to wash our hands, cover our face, and have some.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm trying to be corporate, love. I'm trying to make sure everybody stays safe.
Right. There is another question here, an anonymous attendee. How sure are you that the 106 in SIL would apply retrospectively?
I'm not. I have no idea. No, I don't think it will. I don't think they can do that. I think if you've had something approved, then I don't think they're going to make it retrospective. But we don't know. I mean, there were, the new legislation that's come in with Class MA is different to what was proposed in the consultation document. So, there's all sorts of changes can come between something being a consultation and something coming out into legislation. All sorts of changes can happen.
And finally, there's another question. Is there deemed planning permission time limit for normal planning? I don't know what that means.
No, I don't know what that means either. Right, take away the deemed. Deemed consent is only if the council failed to deal with a prior approval application within 56 days. So that's the only time you get deemed consent. It's consent by default. So
if cash is still there, can you clarify on that question?
A full planning application will, and all of these prior approval applications last for 3 years. From the date on which they are approved, that's 3 years from that date. Full planning applications will normally also last for 3 years. A full plan, not an outline, but a full planning application will also normally last for 3 years from the date of the decision. But there's no deemed consent on a full planning application. The council can take as long as they like.
So on one of these planning applications that last 3 years, you have to start works within 3 years, or do you have completed the works?
No, you have to make what's called a substantial start. You can't just go on site and sort of tinker about and just put a new window in, or see. And you've got to be careful with this demolish and rebuild, because I had just recently put a request into the council and said, look, this property has had planning permission. It was an old pub. They applied to demolish and got approval for 14, 15 units, new residential. What they'd done was it included demolition in the description of the proposed development. So I argued that because my client wanted to buy the site and go on and redevelop, and she said, look, if we have to go through the whole planning process all over again, it's just going to knock it out of the ballpark. They refused to accept that the pub had been demolished, and they refused to accept that that constituted a substantial start on site. So you've got to be very careful with these things. It has to be a substantial. There's all sorts of appeal law and planning law on this about what constitutes a substantive start on site.
Okay, so a trial hole is not good enough.
No. No, not even digging and putting foundations in. It's not, you've not made a proper start.
Got it. Okay. And you talked about Class E to MA.
Yeah.
Operations need separate permission. So I guess that's stuff like bins, fire escapes, and the dreaded cycle parking and all the other.
If you're going to make any significant and material changes to the external elevations, especially in conservation areas, then you're going to have to submit. Councils have started now with all of these prior approvals. They've started putting conditions on to say we accept, prior approval is required and it's granted for the principle of the change of use of the building. However, any external alterations or any fire escape, that type of thing, will require the submission of a full planning application. So arguably it sort of delays it a bit longer, but at least you've got the council's approval to convert the building. So that's sort of a bird in the hand kind of thing. And then you can go ahead and submit a planning application. And quite frankly, subject to the proper design, it's almost a rubber stamping job, because if you're going to be converting the building to residential anyhow, but if you go and put a stupid design in and the windows are horrible and you're putting cladding and zinc siding here, there and everywhere, they're going to have to consider that quite seriously. But mostly it's a box ticking exercise, I would have thought.
Keep it sensible and don't create a work of art, basically.
Well, I mean, you can do in the right location. I mean, all sorts of places, but it depends on how quickly you want your planning permission, really.
Yeah, great. Simon, question from you?
No, just curious, what do you think is the biggest win out of all of that you've gone through there, Linda, with the planning? Which is the biggest win for the...
I think this Class A is the biggest win.
Yeah.
Class MA. Sorry, I keep saying Class A. Class MA. I think this is quite exciting because there's going to be a lot of buildings now that are going to be vacant.
Right.
Debenham stores for one. Now, whether that you've now got this limit of 1,500 square meters. Now, there's going to be a lot of buildings that don't fit that criteria because they're much bigger. But I think this is quite an exciting change, and I think a lot of property developers should be looking at taking this opportunity.
So less high street
is Class MA, basically.
It doesn't need to be high street though. It's aimed predominantly at the high street in order to prevent towns from having tumbleweed blowing down the center of the high street.
Yeah.
But that's what it's aimed at, but it doesn't have to be high streets.
Yeah. You can see it almost high streets being squashed a little bit.
Well, no, they're almost gonna, rather than imploding, I think they're going to explode, because what's going to happen is they're going to start to be donuts or bagels, if you like, because you're going to end up with some residential. I'm not convinced that this is the right approach at all, quite frankly. You're going to end up with lots of little residential units. So any commercial units are going to get pushed out to the periphery. So instead of having a central core, now councils have this retail shopping frontage policy. Well, that's going to be kicked to the sideline because they can no longer exercise that policy and say, oh no, you can't use this, because this is a prior approval right.
Yeah.
So that, you know, lots of councils say, oh no, you have to have commercial at the ground floor, you have to have retail or A2 offices at the ground floor because it's in this retail core area, that they put a blue line on a map and say, there you go, it's in the retail core. Have to have, you can do your flats above, but the ground floor has to be commercial. That's going to go out the window now. So,
Yeah.
you know, all of these local plans that have these policies in, I mean, if you look at the white paper, every local planning authority is going to have to write a new local plan within the next 12 months. Yeah, that's going to happen. I'm dealing with some councils whose local plans are 2002. You know, you think it's like we've moved on. We've gone through various recessions, pandemic, global, all sorts of things, and they're still using these things that are nearly 20 years out of date.
Fair enough. That's very good. Thank you for your chat today, Linda. Very good.
Thank you, Simon. Thanks.
On that subject, where a council's local plan is out of date compared to the national one, or this new, I mean, does that supersede their plan, or will
No, it's unfortunately, it's I despair of dealing with out of date plans, but unfortunately, if it's adopted, it still has to be given weight. Arguably, there are some sections of the National Planning Policy Framework that can override a local plan if it's just not kept up to date. But generally, planning inspectors will stick, just because a local plan is out of date is not a reason to approve something.
Okay, and you mentioned natural light, adequate natural light with class. Yeah. First of all, I guess there's going to be a revised class M, or they're going to do something with it.
Yeah,
so,
I think they're going to change it in some of. They're going to change the class M, O, and Q, the agricultural buildings. It's all going to be changed. I couldn't have predicted the stuff that's gone on in the last 12 months. Well, none of us could, quite frankly, with the pandemic. But I didn't think the whole demolition and rebuild was ever going to come off. But there it is in legislation. So it's quite interesting that I get. This is about my 7th iteration of the planning legislation since I first got my planning degree. I'm on about, planning system 7.0 kind of thing in my life. So, we're probably going to go to 8.0 this year sometime.
So the changes in the planning system are a bit like buses. They don't come along for 10 years and then you get where it was.
Exactly. I think I put that on social media somewhere and said, everything has sort of ticked along and there's been a few bits nibbled at here and there. And then all of a sudden, poof, everything goes mad.
Right. And just another question on definition of natural light, or is that a complex? Get the light.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have to go and get. I mean, a couple of my clients now have had to go and to a daylight expert and get a daylight report. And some of these things are fine, others aren't. They look at it and they go, well, there's a brick wall there, and this is north facing, and it's a whole different science. I don't do it. I would go to an external daylight consultant. So yeah, it's a massive requirement. I mean, if you've got a nice open building in a nice open plot and it's got existing windows, it's been in office use, existing windows, they're all there, and you're not going to have any issues. But there are some buildings that have got, they're right next door to a 4-story blank brick wall. That's going to take all the light out. So every site will be different. Some sites will need a specific daylight report. Other sites won't.
Fantastic. Right. Really good stuff. I think out of most of the webinars I've been on, you've really, really explained it well. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Please, if Simon's upset, you don't, or Surinder's upset, you don't worry about those two. Please come back in September whenever you want next.
Surinder wouldn't upset me, would you, Chuck?
He was
of
trying.
Course not. Whenever ever upset you.
There you go. He was trying quite hard, right? Anyway, Fabulous, as Simon would say, nicking his phrase. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Simon, any more questions?
No, not from me today.
Not
So-
from Surinder, pay your money because I think you've got your 190.
But I did say, please send me the bill and I'll put the check in the post.
Yes, come on.
Yeah. I've heard that. Oh, please, not a check. I'd have to go to a bank, and they've closed all the banks within a 5-mile radius. Then I would have to stand in a queue. Oh my God, no, we're not doing checks.
No, you can go to the post office now.
It's all on there.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
You scan the checks on the mobile banking app.
Yeah, NatWest don't do that.
Oh, I've got to change banks then.
Well, yeah, tell me about it. Don't even get me started on that. Right.
Yeah, that takes 3 months. Just open the account. Trust me, I know. Gosh.
Yeah.
Simon, am I allowed to give headline for talking about money and finances? Am I allowed to disclose Bobby's headline, or is that still a state secret?
No, well, it's fine.
What's my headline?
Well, we thought you'd been arrested. You were being questioned by the police for this Florida holiday you took earlier, but
Oh God, here you go.
please question headline.
The headline is simply a drunk driver was on our road and smashed into our house.
Oh.
So smashed into the drive, the electric gates, everything's gone flying everywhere, iron bars and shatters.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all right. You're not in Minneapolis. Lucky for you, mate. So I'm going to get in trouble for that one.
There you go.
Right.
I think they might have broken 4 or 5 rules. Firstly, I don't know what outside bar they were sitting at 3:30 in the morning. Don't know why they weren't wearing a seatbelt. Don't know why they were actually driving at 80 miles an hour on a 30-mile road.
Bobby, I've got to stop you there. You might be committing perjury or something, so stop.
I don't think I am.
Stop covering up your Florida holiday, all right?
Well, what can I say?
I think you're going a little bit far on this story.
The reason I'm actually not turning the camera on is because I'm in the Caribbean islands on a beach.
Yes. Right. Okay. All right. Come on, guys.
He's moved from Florida now.
Yeah.
Go on to the next one because they've thrown him out, obviously. Anyway, Linda, thank you for that. We look
I'm
forward.
off. I'll leave you boys to it. Thank you very much indeed.
Look
Pleasure
forward-
to see you all yet again.
September. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Linda.
Thanks, Ranjit. See ya.
Thank you.